despite the difficulty. So in the last few weeks, we've been focusing on this question of the election and what is it that we as political people and spiritual people can do to prepare for that election, both at both of those levels, both politically and spiritually. So that's what we're going to continue with today, and we have four really wonderful guests here that are going to help us discern about that, who I'll introduce in a minute. But before I do that, I'm going to ask my fellow community member, David Ragland, to lead us in a grounding exercise. David.
Hey everyone, thank you, Amy. So just invite folks to close their eyes and get very comfortable. Place your feet on the floor. Lean into your chair and breathe. Feel the air that you breathe. Imagine it traveling through your body, providing oxygen. Feel into your body as your legs touch the back of the chair you're sitting in. The back touches the back of the chair. Your feet touches the ground. And know that this is a ground held by many roots that holds the soil into place. See those roots as interconnected as we are with our communities, connected to each other, held up by those who came before us. Our ancestors who fought for us to get to this place and equipped us to do justice in this moment. Our ancestors like the Ramapo Lenape who are still here, whose ancestors were the original inhabitants of the land that I'm currently on, who stewarded the land. We are all held up by those connections and those ancestors. Breathe in and out. In and out. Begin opening your eyes. Knowing that we're connected. For all the new people on the call, you're now connected to our community. Thank you, and we welcome you. At this moment, feel free to run your cursor over your name and make sure that you can add your pronouns. As an explicit act to acknowledge that there's more than the binary. And also feel free to type into the chat who are the original inhabitants of the land that you're on right now. As a prayer and as an acknowledgement that we didn't get here alone and that it came with violence and trauma that has to be healed. Welcome everybody, thank you, and we're excited to hear from our guest. Amy, do you want to say a bit more?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Welcome to folks who have just jumped on. As I mentioned before, this is part two so it's a continuation of a discussion we started 2 weeks ago on preparing for the election spiritually and politically. And 2 weeks ago, we had a really wonderful sharing from Sister Sharifa, who's on our call today, thankfully, and also two other people, Thibault and Alan, who may be joining us, I'm not certain, who really shared at a level of our sort of spiritual preparation. Sister Sharifa shared a beautiful vision of how ritual practiced with like a high level of intentionality at this time can help to unleash like a whirlwind of good intention or goodwill, I think. And Thibault shared about like what they envisioned putting in their go bag, and especially talked about sort of mental preparation for the difficulties of the level of manipulation that we're going to have to be wading through in this time. And Alan talked about just like the level of fear that he, as a psychotherapist, has been witnessing and encountering, and just how important it is to be doing intentional work to really work to locate our core selves, our core sort of loving selves during this time. So that's a rough summary of what was a really deep discussion, and you can listen to it if you haven't already. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. But this session, we're going to hear from 4 guests who are all sort of really thick into the political level of preparation. And what we're really looking forward to is an opportunity to talk about like balancing that really political work with our efforts to stay sane, stay grounded, practice our rituals, and keep our hearts open. So I think David's going to introduce our first speaker.
And welcome, Amy. And we're gonna start with Laurie. I'm sorry, you like clarified it, and then like I messed it up. But here we go. So I actually reached out to a colleague of mine who has been doing so much work around accompaniment and nonviolence, and his name is Eli McCarthy, and um, I'll share this on the call, but Eli has been leading a group of people who have accompanied activists like Cori Bush as she recently ran for Congress, and Laurie is one of his colleagues, but on her own, she's an international development specialist focusing on democracy, good governance, practice, and conflict resolution in sub-Saharan Africa. She's trained election workers, civil society activists, and election observers in a dozen countries over the past 30 years and served as an international election observer, during many continents' first multi-party contest under new constitutions. Um, she's also trained local dispute resolution practitioners in post-conflict environments and lives in DC. We're really excited to hear from you, Laurie Cooper. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David, and thank you to all of you for accepting me into your midst. I think I should mention that I feel like I'm a relatively new addition to the DC Peace team, having really found them at what I think is kind of an appropriate moment earlier in the summer as our pandemic. Amidst the pandemic was breaking out and revealing kind of a lot more than I think a lot of people truly bargained for. I think I wanted to really be part of the Peace Team's efforts because I think that while we are in, we are really going through some things now. I think that there will be and should be opportunities for local community members to participate in the healing process, whether that's discussions around how institutions are going to be formed or reformed in the future, or simply assisting our neighbors and families to kind of process. That's kind of what DC Peace Team is about, and certainly what I'm about. Just to add a couple of things from what David had mentioned, the DC Peace Team is 10 years old this year. Got its start with the really via people coming together to work on conflict. I guess I'd say issues of conflict around returning citizens, people who are formerly incarcerated, coming back and being integrated in local communities, conflicts between sort of almost intergenerational young folks who didn't necessarily have a lot to do, but who found some sense of belonging in terms of maybe gang activity or just kind of gathering and moving around from place to place. In the case of DC, around Union Station, around Anacostia, and just doing what young folks do, which is creating a situation that people need to kind of get involved in. So there are the Peace Team has also been involved in things such as even farmers market type of disputes. So imagining about, for example, conflicts over who gets what space on which day, or how the community is either receptive or maybe not receptive. I think maybe one other. So I'll just to kind of cap it up, the DC Peace Team really focuses its efforts in three basic areas: skill training in nonviolent communication, bystander intervention, active bystander intervention, and unarmed protection, as David mentioned. In addition to that, we do training in restorative justice, which is what I was talking about in terms of conflict transformation and really kind of healing processes for groups that invite us to be involved and to work with them in a facilitated dialogue session, as well as maybe in a training space. And I would say that they've been DCP's team's been asked to be involved in places as far-flung as China, San Diego, San Antonio, not too far flung from San Diego in scheme of things, and in New York. So I would, last couple of things that I would say are that in terms of DCP's team is that since this summer, they've taken many of their, in fact, all of their training online, which means that they've been able to reach audiences in Africa, in Europe, Latin America, all the continents, really, which has been a big advantage, I think, for them. Very active on weekends. We have trainings scheduled pretty much. There's this one that happens, something that happens every week, every weekend. So I think if we could get a link in the chat, I could maybe put that in later if somebody would like, or if David, if you'd like to just pop that in now, folks can go on the website and look at some of the trainings that are on offer, and you're absolutely welcome to join. So, right. So all of that, all that being said, what we are working on within the Peace team is using, creating a training session. Hopefully this won't be the last time that we do it, but at least a preliminary session on how to use nonviolent communication and active bystander intervention techniques, tools and techniques during this election process, this election period, this election season. As we've heard, as we all know, the campaign began when reasonable people would say that campaigns began in 20, basically after 2016. But certainly things have ramped up. There's anxiety around the process, particularly as most people are not familiar with the mail-in ballots or with absentee ballot process. That's creating a window of people to I would go ahead and say disinformation, or to repeat things that may be partly true but aren't entirely accurate, which does tend to depress confidence in the process. So we are looking at specific areas of vulnerability, whether that's in a precinct or a polling station or a tally center, and that will vary based on which geographic area you're in and what kind of electoral system your individual state or even individual county has for which type of election. How to ensure that, and by ensure we mean that how to anticipate the kind of pressures that might be put on the people doing the counting, whether they're poll workers, presiding officers, people kind of out front that are there to keep order, and what are some of the issues, or what could happen as the election day comes and as ballots are counted, but it's fairly likely that there won't be a result that's announced the night of the election. That's going to be kind of new for many people. Maybe not everybody on this call, but I think that there are lots of people who expect that results are going to come out. The race will be called because that's how it's been done for as long as many of us have been alive that same night. So how to how to really deploy skills in nonviolent communication and in active bystander to be with people as the anxiety, or as anxiety either ramps up or sets in while the counting process goes on. And maybe the last thing I'll just say is that I've just come off of some really interesting research provided by the Voting Rights Lab in terms of how to manage voters' expectations about the counting process. It is possible to provide information to people who are, for example, expecting a result on November 3rd, to be able to help by explaining the process, the counting process to them. We're able to instill or increase their level of confidence, increase the level of understanding about the process, increase their confidence in the process as a whole, and to increase their resilience against disinformation and any kind of, I guess I would call it provocative activity as the process goes on prior to certification. So that's kind of our in, and I guess I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Next, we're going to hear from Pete. Pete Borum is the founder and executive director of a company called Squint Labs, which focuses on leveraging tech, content, and capital to combat misinformation and media manipulation. So as far as I understand what that means, which I'm hoping Pete's going to break it down for us, but sort of working on the good guy side of like all this complicated social media data stuff. And I think it's worth noting that Pete was selected by his peers as class co-president at Stanford, and also by the administration at Wharton Business School, where he attended as a member of their 40 under 40 list in 2018. So we're really glad you're out there doing this work, Pete, and we're looking forward to learning more about how are you preparing for the election, both politically and spiritually right now. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so to speak to the work that we do at Squint Labs, think about it a little bit like offense and defense. Everyone, I think, at this point, for the most part, is familiar with the efforts that are being made to sow confusion amongst pretty much any voting population online, and especially where the voting population has the highest leverage in this election. So if there's a swing state or a swing voter population, you can be sure that there are parties who are spending significant amounts of money to sow distrust in the process, to create confusion, to discourage people from voting, to encourage people to create divides in their community so as to avoid cohesion. And this is not a single faceted problem. There are a lot of different approaches that are being used to do this, ranging from the creation of fake videos and audio clips and news articles and websites from Russian troll factories to the creation of fake accounts on social media to make it appear as if there's a lot more support for a particular point of view than there in reality is. Or to come into a cohesive community and to sow discord within that community. And so just as there's no single approach to doing this, there's also no single solution. And there are a lot of different companies that are out there who have developed technology that addresses different aspects of this approach. So if you are if you're someone who's trying to create a fake video to make it seem as if Joe Biden has, used a racial slur, or to make it appear as though the cops who killed Breonna Taylor are bragging about how they got away with murder. These are hypothetical scenarios. These aren't videos that I've seen recently, but they're the type of videos that I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some of them coming out in the next couple of weeks, especially to create discord. There are companies that are out there that have developed technology that can then identify that video as being faked. There are companies that are out there that have developed technology to be able to say, okay, this Twitter account is a real person, this Twitter account is likely to be a bot, or these 5 Twitter accounts are likely controlled by the same person out of Russia. And they're only here to sow disinformation and distrust. Additionally, the amount of content that's out there that's being generated every day is just way too overwhelming for any fact-checking organization to be able to keep up with. So how can you use technology to automatically fact-check things, or to spread the fact-checking amongst a large network of people? So those are some of the things that we think about on the defensive side that are intended to inoculate us against misinformation, so that if we are seeing something like this, then it will let us know, hey, you shouldn't trust this thing that you're seeing because it's been proven to be manipulated, or the basis of this article has been disproven. And then on the offensive side, we work with social media celebrities called influencers to create content that counterbalances the misinformation. And so this comes back to what I did for the past 10 years. I ran an agency in New York called Vilela. And just as, someone like Michael Jordan would do commercials for Nike or commercials for Hanes underwear back in the 90s and 2000s, there are social media celebrities who aren't nearly as popular as Michael Jordan, but have very engaged, smaller communities online. On Instagram, they've got 1 million people who follow them, or they've got 1 million people who follow them on YouTube or on Twitter. And everything that they put out online gets, several 100,000 or 1 million people to watch it and to engage with it and to share it. And so similarly to how Nike or Hanes uses Michael Jordan's celebrity appeal to his audience to be able to sell more shoes or more underwear or more t-shirts, a lot of advertisers work with these Instagram celebrities or these YouTube celebrities to sell their products online. And so I spent 10 years doing that, and have basically taken everything I learned from selling lipstick to teenage girls over Instagram to try and sell progressive ideas to populations that are on Instagram or YouTube. And I've been doing a lot of work. Most of the work that I've been doing has been much more on the content side as we get into the election rather than on the technology side. I'm doing a campaign for the National Immigration Law Center, which is called Immigrants Are Essential, which is to highlight the essential role that immigrants play in our communities, in our workforce, our churches, our families, in our country. I'm working on a campaign with the New Moral Majority to facilitate conversations between progressive faith-based leaders and people who have large audiences of Christian Latinos in Florida who are being inundated with messages that the only vote for Christians is to vote for a pro-life candidate as opposed to a much more comprehensive love and kindness and dignity toward the stranger, to the other, to the least among us approach. Additionally, working on a voter registration campaign with some executives from YouTube and LinkedIn, getting people to register, make sure they're registered to vote, and doing some more kind of geo-targeted, more localized campaigns. So we worked with the Cori Bush campaign in St. Louis to arrange for her to make appearances on popular Instagram channels and YouTube channels and Twitter channels for people who are popular within St. Louis, so that she could get the message out there to people who weren't seeing her ads on television, who weren't listening to the radio stations that she was making appearances on, who due to COVID weren't able to meet her in person and shake her hand and have a face-to-face conversation, which is such an important part of the political process. So that's all work that I'm trying to do and that I'm working on. From a spiritual standpoint, keeping myself as busy as possible, I think is a great way for me to stay centered. It's easy, I think, to become overwhelmed by the enormity of the problems that we face right now. But I try to, accept the things I cannot change and change the things that I can. There's this story of a young boy walking along a beach where the tide had come in and left millions of starfish that were out baking in the sun, and he was picking one up and tossing it back in the ocean, and picking up another one and tossing it back in the ocean. And a man comes by and says, son, why are you wasting your time? Don't you see that you can't possibly make a difference amongst these millions of starfish? And he picks one up and he tosses it back in the water, and he says, makes a difference to that one. And so I'm just trying to make as big a difference in whatever sphere of influence that I possibly can. I have a 1-year-old son, and trying to, I would have brought him in here, but he'd be much less behaved than the other kids that we have on the call today. Trying to keep in mind that he's my why, his future, making sure that he has a country and a community and a planet to grow up in, keeps me very focused on why this is important as opposed to why everything is terrible. And also, I've especially these past 2 months, or the 2 months prior to the election, just trying to stay stay very clean in everything that I eat and consume. You know, keeping my mind and my body as clean and as focused and as energetic as possible, so as to avoid, you know, anything that will distract me or get me depressed or feeling like I don't care as much as I know that I actually do. So those are all things that I'm working on right now. I'm happy to talk about them further, but thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Pete. I think, Laura, are you going to introduce Amy now? Laura's on mute. Let's see. Just a minute.
Sorry, I just got to, I just lost the
Oh, that's okay. I'll do it. So, actually what Pete was just mentioning is a good segue into Amy's sharing. Pete was mentioning the work he's doing on Cori Bush's campaign in St. Louis. And Cori Bush is one of the people that was featured on a documentary that some of you may have seen called Knock Down the House. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was also featured on that, and Amy Vilela was also featured on that, and we're very, very glad to have you here with us today, Amy. Amy ran for election to the U.S. House to represent Nevada's 4th District in 2018, and she's keeping on, and we really would like to hear, you know, how have you been approaching this time, both politically and spiritually, Amy?
I think like many people on this call and across the nation probably have felt a lot of the things that I've felt. It's been an emotional roller coaster. We're fighting so many different things on so many different levels. You know, we're fighting against fascism on one level, but we also have the fight still burning within us to get things such as Medicare for All and Green New Deal, things that really matter to the progressive community. And where I've seen my role in this, I started out in this presidential election in, you know, making sure I was actually going across the country for Senator Bernie Sanders and speaking about the issues that mean so much to me. For those who don't know much about me or my background, my entry into politics came at the death of my 22-year-old daughter, Shalyn, when she died from systemic racism and a lack of health care. And I didn't realize at that time that I'd heard that those things happen, but you know, having it hit home to me, someone who had never been politically involved, when I started to understand how much politics played a role in my personal everyday life, to the extent that it played a role in my daughter's death, I knew I had to do something. And it's been a journey since then, and it's, you know, I always keep in mind when I'm on this journey, there's many times that it becomes very taxing, and it feels like sometimes like you just want to give up. It's just too much, man. Another day is something else. Like I got to fight something else too now. Like I'm tired already. What else are they gonna throw at us? And I remember something, as cliche as it may sound, I remember the words of MLK, you know, that we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. And it's kind of where I feel a lot of people are right now, that we are going through all of these trials and tribulations and seeing what's happening, and it's scary. I think my role has transformed since Senator Sanders, you know, did not pursue further to become the nominee for the Democratic Party, has been helping to make sure that we are really exciting the base by making sure I'm helping candidates up and down the ballot. So first stop was out there helping my sister Cori Bush and in her win. That was very, very exciting to see that whole process and watch that transformation. They came hard for her, and yet we knew that we were going to be seeing victory in that. So that was very, very exciting. Also on the way out to help out Paula Jean. I've also been helping other women across this nation and men who are out there fighting to represent their communities. So it's just trying to keep people engaged and making sure that people are excited. And if they're not feeling the most excited about who's at the top of the ticket, we're gonna make sure they're excited about people down ballot and get them out to vote and make sure that they're voting in this process. And I'm always telling people, regardless of who your preferred candidate is in this election, for me, this is more not a vote for a particular person, it's a vote against fascism. And it's a vote against continuing down the road that we're going now. There's still lots of work to do. I really like what you said, Pete. That's one of the things I've always said through my entire career in politics has been, remembering my why. Every day when I'm getting up and I think it's too much, or I think that I can't do one more thing, or I've just had enough of the foolishness and mayhem that's going on, I remember my why. It's my daughter's death is the fuel that feeds my fire, but my why is to ensure that these things don't happen to anybody else, right? That no one else has to see a loved one pass, regardless if it's from healthcare, from discrimination, from environmental issues, from poverty. These are the issues that we're really fighting for, and that we have to keep that in mind through this time period. And so that's been really where I've been, focusing on and really trying to keep myself grounded through that, on top of, having to go through COVID and some of the isolation issues of that. So it's been a journey for sure, going from the knock down the house days to entering into this primary for the President of the United States, to helping out other people actually running for office. So it's really been quite something. And I can see that there's going to be a lot of exciting change coming in the future. I've also been helping out on Jamal Bowman's campaign. So there's a lot of exciting people coming into office, and a lot of excitement going, into this election period. And so I, looking forward to November. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And now I'm going to take a couple weeks off and go somewhere with no TVs, no internets, nothing.
Thank you so much. I think you might be the first person I've heard saying that you're looking forward to November. So I'm going to try to take that in.
One way or the other, come November, we're going to know where we stand, and at least it will be this anxiety, and it will be gone. And to me, we'll know what the fight is then. Is it the fight to push for an agenda that really helps the American people with a Democratic president? Or are we on the fight for our lives? Like, it's going to be one fight or the other, but we're always going to be in that fight, because we're always going to have to be looking out for our neighbors. We have to remember that saying, we're only as safe as the most vulnerable in our communities. And we should be out there fighting every day, no matter how safe or how comfortable we feel. There is always a fight that we should be engaging in. So yeah, it's just, at least I'll know what that fight is, like where are we going next, and start that next chapter.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amy. All right, our last guest is Patrick Taylor, who's a political consultant who has worked for MoveOn.org, also the North Carolina Democratic Party, wow, and the Bernie Sanders campaign. And he's currently on the board of a group called Brand New Congress. He's a Morehouse College graduate, and it sounds like he has been really influenced by engaging with Malawi and Tanzania in his journey. Patrick, we're really glad to have you here, and please break it down for us. How are you preparing for the election politically and spiritually?
Man, where do I start? It's quite a lot going on these days. Just like how Amy just spoke about, this is, we're definitely in a very interesting time right now. But that it's, I think, I'm forgetting his name, Pete. Yeah. It can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming with just all of what's going on, and how quickly it hits, and how much it stacks on top of itself. Is quite a lot going on. But at the same time, there's also a lot of positivity going on too. And that's, definitely what one has to focus on. You have to keep in mind, these things that need to change and the things that we have to fight against. But at the same time, you have to keep perspective about where you're at, and you know, kind of count your blessings and say it that way, to really, you know, keep your grounding. You know, like the exercise we kind of worked on at the beginning of this call. It's funny because I've started meditating more. It's not something I really used to do when I was younger. I have my children doing the same thing, and it's helped them a lot in school. So that's, you know, that's been a positive thing. But you know, it's just been very humbling, really, in a lot of ways. Just being frank, to see how much work we really have to do. But also been very humbling to see, you know, how far we've come. You know, so just kind of diving into myself, you know, my background is, I went to Morehouse, I studied electrical engineering, went to Africa twice, had my James Baldwin moment, realized what was going on in America, and came back and switched my major to international studies. And so since then I left, graduated, went to DC, started at the National Urban Leaks Policy Institute, doing, I was their broadband and technology fellow. So that was kind of my interest in the public policy because I had no experience prior in public policy and, you know, in politics really largely. I, you know, was definitely, my mother was very politically, you know, inclined. She, you know, she was born in the 70s, you know, she was a 70s baby. She was, so she definitely kind of imparted a lot of that kind of spirit onto me in a lot of ways. But yeah, you know, so I got married, had a child, left DC, and came to Charlotte, and that's kind of really how I moved into progressive politics, specifically. And that really started with Bernie, and from Bernie, you know, came Brand New Congress. From Brand New Congress, a lot of us moved into Justice Democrats. Basically the Brand New Congress is really the kind of, I guess you could say, the parent. Sorry, and I'm not on my laptop, so I need to stop moving my phone around, moving my hands. I apologize. But you know, we basically, Brand New Congress was I guess you could say, the parent organization to some degree. And out of that spun out Justice Democrats, when we realized that with Trump winning, the post-partisan message just was not resonating with people the same. And so we put a lot more focus on Justice Democrats, which was focused exclusively on getting Democrats elected. But it was, you know, Brand New Congress that started, you know, Alex Ocasio's race. And, you know, we were some of the, if I'm not mistaken, we might have been the very first organization to support Corey back in 2018. And so, you know, my focus now is really just trying to support the movement in various ways. You know, I had a pretty, you know, traumatic, I guess, family issues around 2017, 2018. So I left Justice Democrats and really kind of politics largely in a lot of ways, for most of 2018, some of 2019, just to go handle personal things with my family. But this you know, this year has definitely been, you know, tried to, you know, I guess to say from the shadows, you know, kind of helping candidates, but then also for my role within Brand New Congress as a board member. But a lot of the focus definitely was just, you know, I guess, you know, largely the movement as a whole, really, but, you know, trying to provide some help to Corey's campaign, what little I, you know, did do, which really wasn't much. This time around, I was Corey's campaign manager back when I worked with Brand New Congress and Justice Democrats. So that was how I really got to know Corey. And now we're just, you know, just really good friends. You know, so kind of, you know, going into some of the work that we're doing with BNC is, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, in some ways, I'm assuming a lot of y'all probably know about things, you know, as things stand right now politically on the call. You know, Cori Bush has won her race pretty much. She still has a general election to get through, but I'm 99% sure everything will be fine there, and she's going to Congress. Same for Jamal Bowman. And so these are wins against longtime Democratic incumbents. These are huge wins in a lot of ways. Same as AOC. In some ways, to me, they're bigger. But we were, you know, the first ones, like I said, to back Corey back in 2018, political organization-wise. And, you know, this has kind of moved us into where we're at, you know, currently with the situation, well, you know, with the standing of our candidates. You know, I would say for me personally, probably the biggest focus is Paula Jean Swearingen. You know, she has a serious chance to, you know, beat Shelley Moore Capito, flip the Senate, you know, in a race that the Democratic Party is kind of largely ignoring. But she's broken all kinds of fundraising records. And again, you know, she most certainly can send Shelley Moore home. And, you know, we have, you know, others that have done very well. We have 3 candidates that are running against Republicans in swing states, John Hoadley, Missouri 6, Kari Eastman in Nebraska 2, Nick Rabondo in Ohio 5. You know, I'm going to read some of this stuff from some of these notes I got. But yeah, like, you know, if Nick wins his race, that can help flip Ohio and take that state away from Trump. You know, Nebraska's split electors means that, you know, the second district can be one of the deciding races in the final electoral college count. For Trump, you know, we also have Adrian Bell out there in Texas 14, Mike Siegel in Texas 10, who are both in a position to help flip Texas. You know, so, you know, kind of the overarching theme is, you know, we're replacing corporate Democrats with, you know, working class people of color that, you know, we're electing reps, you know, that have integrity and principles, scruples, morals, ethics, you know, and those who really understand, you know, the pain that, you know, most Americans are actually, you know, are really going through right now. And so, you know, we're adding to the squad, to say it that way, to use that term. But, you know, really, you know, doing what is the cornerstone, or I would say the should be at any point in time the overarching focus for this democracy, which is expanding this democracy. I think you still had over 50% for sure that didn't vote in 2018 for the presidential. So we still have a lot of Americans that do not participate in the electoral process. But anyway, kind of, you know, summing up stuff with BNC, you know, a lot of our focus is, you know, we're also running against Republicans, you know, who are, you know, towing, you know, Trump's agenda. So, you know, it's not enough to really just replace Trump. Trump is a symptom. You know, and so we have to replace the Republicans who've stood by him, his, you know, and propped up his racism, his bigotry, his corruption, his utter incompetence. And, you know, at the same time, we have to replace, you know, any rep, as far as we're concerned, that, you know, maintains the status quo that has helped to bring about Trump. Because again, Trump is a symptom. And so, you know, all together, we've got about 10 candidates in the general, 2 incumbents, you know, 2 Democrats in safe blue districts, and 6 taking on Republicans. So we're in a really good place right now to just continue to kind of build on the work that we've been doing thus far, and to continue to try to, like I said, expand this democracy, as well as, you know, move the Overton window on issues such as Medicare for all. I mean, there's really a lot to say, but I'm going to kind of shut up at this point and just kind of maybe touch on some of this stuff a little bit later. Yeah. Sorry, my phone was messing up over here for a moment. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your sharing. And I was just wondering if you, I'm getting checked by my assistant doctor here. I was just wondering if you might, I tried to be writing down the names of the candidates you were mentioning, but if you would have time to send those or put them in the chat, that would be great. And so now I would like to do 2 things. One is just invite anybody who has questions for anybody who has spoken to put them in the chat. And also, I wanted to invite Sister Sharifa, if she would like, as a respondent from last week, to share any thoughts she has. And I also know that Warren has this particular question that he already texted me. So we can maybe hear from Sister Sharifa and Warren if they would like to share, and then we can take any other questions that people have.
Warren, you can go right ahead. I'm fine for right now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. I had a question that came up during Laurie's conversation and kind of overlaps into some of what Pete's conversation was. Laurie mentioned the phrase disinformation resilience, which caught my ear, and I was wondering if you could double click some of the components of that, and also have some comment about how we might replicate the kinds of things that you're identifying in that package where we are locally.
Okay. Sure, I'll take a stab. I think the thing that is particularly of concern to me is that as DCP's team and as an activist myself, I tend to think about what's happening kind of on the street, in front of a building, around a building, in a space where as I said, where stuff is happening. But it's important to remember that as Pete said, that the fight is also very much online. It's on your whatever WhatsApp group you're involved in. It's being taken to. It's been it's clear that it's on pretty much every social media outlet that there is. And so when I think about how we, maybe more as individuals than as partly as individuals and partly as a group, but as an individual, what I think is important in terms of developing resilience is using tools. They can be tech tools, and they don't have to be high-tech tools, but being able to, first of all, before sharing anything, be certain as to the source. It's fairly easy for people to, for example, grab the masthead of a news publication and manipulate it to drop a story in. There are we've seen examples of doxing and sort of swatting, where someone's private information is shared and encouraged, and people are encouraged to harass that person. Thinking about how to verify sources before passing something on to folks who may or may not have the same intention as you, but then also being vigilant about the different types of attacks that might come online, and using in this case nonviolent communication, and maybe not active bystander, but really talking to people. This is some of these points of view that you're expressing are they're pretty extreme, and can you help me understand what you're hoping to achieve by that? Obviously you'd calibrate that kind of question or messaging for the person that you're involved with, but it's just a highlight to know that not only in the news organ space, but in social media space, as well as in the physical space, there is the disinformation, confusion, and chaos are really what is, are the three main tools that are being employed by people who really want to depress participation in this process, whether it's as voters, as candidates, and something in between.
Thank you.
It's really interesting and challenging for me to hear you say that, because I know that I think I definitely am guilty of avoiding conversation with people that are expressing viewpoints that I feel like I'm participating in the polarization, at that level. By avoiding those conversations. So I'm gonna take to heart what you're saying. Are there any other questions or responses that anybody would like to offer? and we also have at times gone out into small group breakout rooms, so we can do that in a minute. But I just wanted to give an opportunity for questions or responses people might want to share with the whole group. And thank you, Patrick. Patrick's putting a couple of races to watch in the chat. If you haven't seen them, feel free to check them out. Thank you. Great. Laura? Laura, you're still muted.
I've been really interested in what you've been saying about the ways that you have been engaged in getting prepared for this election. I'm just wondering if any of our guests have suggestions as to how we might best be preparing and helping in this election.
I can say some things I know are doing. Really, is talking to your family and friends. That's the first thing, and making sure they have a plan to vote, that they know where to go. And also supporting people who are running on the down ballot and initiatives, getting involved locally. A lot of times people aren't really, some people aren't really enthusiastic about the presidential race. But I've seen a lot of people, once you start talking about like initiatives that are, you know, on your local ballot for like local school money or things of that sort, it kind of gets them hyped up and gets them ready to go out. I'm really working hard on trying to overcome the voter apathy, right? Like where people don't see how it relates to them, feel like, you know, that it doesn't play a part in their lives, so they're not voting. And it's just trying to find a way to get them to actually come out and vote. And usually that's with the local elections are so important, so important. They get people out to the polls.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Matt. Can I say something?
Please, yes.
Yeah. Hi. I'm also a member of the community here in Stony Point, and I just wanted to bring out that if you're talking about local elections, and there are some elections here in Rockland that are important, and one that is our congressional race, because Mondaire Jones is running for Congress in this race, and it's really exciting. He's also I don't think you know, he was on the list for Justice Democrats or Brand New Congress, but he was endorsed by Bernie and AOC, and is an awesome progressive in a lot of ways. I've met him a bunch of times, and it's really exciting that, I mean, he declared to run against Nita Lowey before she decided to drop out. So it was he was willing to go for that fight, just like Jamal Bowman and others against the incumbent. And so it's really exciting that he's in this race. And so I definitely appreciate the talking about local races and people to be excited about and get people out to vote. So thanks for the work that y'all are doing, and that is definitely something I'm excited about, to have at least like 3 to 4 to 8 more like really awesome progressive people in Congress. Like, that is exciting. So thanks.
I do have a question, Amy, actually.
Great.
For all three. If over the next few weeks, as for those of us who are tuning in to the debates for either president or vice president, do you have any tips, any suggestions in terms of participating in that cycle, listening to debates, you know, how to deal with that energy of just sitting through them, trying to listen objectively, and as, you know, as a citizen, as someone who cares about the process. Yeah, do you have any tips that you can share?
So one thing coming from just the disinformation lens is that I think anyone who watched the debate last night would have a hard time recalling a lot of Joe Biden's answers. And it's not because he didn't answer the questions, but because he never had an opportunity to get the answer out before he was interrupted multiple times. I don't think that was an accident. I think that, I think that Trump is intentionally trying to avoid people from hearing messages that will get them excited about Joe Biden. And if the enthusiasm gap between Trump supporters and Biden supporters remains where it is, then turnout can fluctuate wildly on election day or in early voting. And so I don't think that there is a lot that could happen between now and election day that is going to further appall people with Trump's behavior to the point that that's the tipping point. If they haven't been turned off to him completely by now, then I don't know that they ever will be. But I do think that there are a lot of people who will stay home and decide not to vote because they don't, to the point that Amy was making, they don't see what's in it for them, or they don't, they've heard a lot of bad things about Biden and don't believe in voting for the lesser of two evils. They'd rather sit it out. And I do think that there are a lot of things that Biden and Harris have done. A lot of concessions have been made to progressive voters. A lot of really good policies that were tried and tested in the Obama administration that have been dismantled since then, but they talked about bringing back. That people need to hear about, because I think that people need something to vote for and not just something to vote against. I think that the debates, I don't think the Biden camp has done a good enough job of highlighting what they are going to do for Americans other than to get Trump out of office. And I think he tried to do that last night, but I think it's Trump's strategy to drown him out and not allow him to do that. So if there are things that we hear, rather than amplifying, Trump, the media and the rest of our society is going to amplify Trump's failure to denounce white supremacists last night, right? And so I don't think that we need to pile onto that pile. It doesn't need further attention. What needs further attention are the positive things about a Biden presidency that get you excited. And if I'm going to share a link to someone had put down 100 reasons why they're excited for a Biden presidency. And if all of Biden's candidacy doesn't get you excited, that's understandable. But there's always something I think that people can latch onto, and depending on who you're talking to, really being able to kind of keep this list at the ready so that you can talk to them about the things that are most important to them as well. Let me find that. It'll take me a minute or two. That's my 2 cents.
I kind of come at it a little bit different. I'm watching these, and some of the things I'm hearing, I have to keep remembering my why and why I'm voting the way I'm voting. It's very disheartening to hear someone from the Democratic Party that's talking about don't support a Green New Deal or things of that sort. So there's my whole emphasis is to make sure that I am helping the progressive community not feel like they're being pushed out, and that they still have a voice in this, and there's still work to be done, and that it's to get in, to be motivated to go out and vote. So there is a pull right now that's happening within our own party, and that's just from my perspective and the people that I'm speaking with, the people that are reaching out. I think that it's time to be vigilant right now and reaching out to people within our own party, checking where they're at, and constantly talking about why we're voting, and reminding them what we're voting for or against. Actually, it's against fascism, and that there's a bigger picture here. And so when I'm dealing with people that are reaching out to me during these, I'm always thinking about, what are the things that I'm going to be saying to both people who are not really, that are Democrats, but are really disheartened that some of the things they're really fighting for are not being included, or possibly during debate for whatever reason are being kind of stomped on or pushed out. And then I'm also thinking in my mind simultaneously about the people that I know that are Trump supporters or on the fence, and I'm always trying to find things that are personal, because to me, that's how you relate to people, regardless of where they are in the political spectrum. We're all human beings, and we might disagree about how we're going to get there, but if we start talking about connections. So while I'm watching this, I'm listening to what's being said and thinking in my head, how am I going to take this information and present this, to someone else? And on a personal care, like spiritual end of it, I'm just, again, keeping in my mind that this is, things don't happen overnight, and the complete change that we're wanting to see, or what we're wanting to happen, doesn't happen, overnight. So keeping that in mind, but knowing that, there's so many of us out here right now that are trying to fight for something better. Because there's sometimes I'm like, sometimes you just need a glass of wine after all the foolishness. All that thinking doesn't work, then you go get a glass of wine. But yeah, it is stressful watching this, and it's stressful when I'm constantly worried that there's a lot going on. There's so many things happening in this country. It's really not just even about Biden versus Trump. There's a lot of things, other things that are going to be playing into this election besides just that. And that's kind of where I've been going and heading down that path. I don't know if that made sense, but yeah.
Yes, thank you. Laurie, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I would just add to this. I'm not, how can I put this? I'm not a partisan person, but I'm not saying that I'm not going to vote in a partisan way when the time comes. Let's see, my sense of adherence to process and accountability and procedure and really kind of sense of justice is what really kind of motivates me to do the things that I do. And so maybe in terms of advice on watching the debates, it's understanding that the debates are, they're part of our political process. Whether or not there are, and we know that rules are kind of established for them. We also cannot possibly at this point be surprised at the way that the two candidates are approaching them. So I think that being able to kind of being able to not let yourself kind of get all sort of stomach churny about the content, and focused on being as informed a voter and a neighbor, a candidate, an activist as you can be. That's really kind of the way that I'm helping to keep myself grounded, and that could be something as simple, or not simple, but yeah, actually I will say that it's kind of simple, as reaching out to your local Board of Elections, finding out, I think that DC has been, I will say they've been really great with the push communication in terms of verifying voter registration status, voting districts, explaining the process that if you want an absentee ballot, you need to ask for it by this date. So yeah, I mean, looking, maybe this isn't necessarily as sort of sexy an issue as some of the others that we've talked about, but being able to be calm and understand that and understanding of the process of absentee balloting, if that's what you're going to do, of mail-in voting, if that's what you're going to do, of the counting process, and being able to kind of counter, as I said, some of the particularly some of the ways in which the integrity of the election was called into question last night and the night before, and tomorrow night. And actually, if I recall correctly, in 2016, he said both that if he won or that he lost, Trump would claim fraud. So there we are.
I think, Patrick, would you like to answer the question that Sister Sharifa posed? I'm not, there we go.
Sorry, I've been over here helping my son with
That's
schoolwork.
It was about
What was the?
the debates and any advisement for just making sense, navigating those. Yeah.
And so this is really in general, kind of focusing on just, kind of how we're preparing for all of this and how we're kind of moving through all of this, correct?
Yeah, just if you had any tips, yep, as we engage with that process of listening to the debates and sharing information. And that could also be for the candidates that you spoke about earlier. It didn't just have to be the presidential debates, but any other kind of political debates that you're talking about as well.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of the focus right now is going to be just essential for both where we're at right now, but also just in general for the future. Is just really kind of keeping perspective, and looking to the future. How we're kind of, planning, for what's to come. We got, the clear and present dangers to say that's now, but at the same time, like a lot of this is, I guess to kind of put it in best ways possible is, Corey first ran for her race. I think she first ran in 2016. Yeah, for Senate, state Senate. So from there to, unseating a 50-year incumbent, a 50-year political dynasty, excuse me. In 2020, that really has taken a lot of focus, a lot of concerted effort, a lot of commitment, as well as kind of taking a, I guess to say a cold fury, kind of approach, because this is definitely, this is a marathon. This is not a race at all. And, in terms of like, folks are definitely, it's going to be difficult at times to stay encouraged. And so, I will say, kind of one of the things I was thinking about is really like there has to be which is why I love the work that Pete's doing, a clear commitment to, trustworthy and verifiable information. But, within that, it's like, understanding how you can cast a ballot, if you're able. And, if you live in Florida, this is a little different. If you're, but if you're, you're able and, but also, like highlighting the importance of having, a vote. So if you're somebody who's unable to cast a vote, knowing that there's a place within, for you within the electoral movement, to organize and engage with potential voters. Disinformation is definitely a huge issue. It fuels voter suppression, voter intimidation. And, it's, how to put it, it's understandable. It's understandable in a lot of ways that people are very concerned about what Trump may pull. But right now, folks have the power and the opportunity to make sure, largely in a lot of ways, that there's a free and fair election. Go volunteer to be a poll watcher. In a lot of ways, what I'm saying is kind of like staying engaged is going to help one to kind of move through these difficulties, as well as just in regard to these debates specifically and just kind of engagement as it is right now, keeping perspective that, things are not okay right now. But at the same time, our country in a lot of ways has definitely faced worse. And, we can most certainly get through this if we keep the right mindset, and doing some of the things that like Amy spoke about, keeping connected with friends, staying grounded, getting away from politics sometimes, completely turning your phone off, putting that thing on airplane mode, and picking up a book that you actually enjoy to read, whether you've read it several times or not. Keeping your sanity is definitely going to be obviously something very important if we're all going to stay active and engaged and really be helpful to this movement. But also if we're just going to keep our sanity, you know what I'm saying, period. and so, I think, keeping in mind that kind of that sustained engagement is going to help, focusing on that building longer engagement within the process, and recognizing that we're not, bound to the life cycle of a single candidate and campaign. Shifting that focus to kind of collective power building, deepening your analysis around, year-round organizing. One of the best quotes I probably have ever read outside of the Bible, I'm a devout Christian myself, was ironically probably etched in, because this is one of the much older buildings in DC. But it said, and this, could have literally been etched in by slaves that built, and I believe it's one of the really old Department of Justice buildings. But it said the price for freedom is eternal struggle. And that was a kind of a tough pill to swallow when I read it. It was unsettling a little bit. But that's the reality of this democracy. This democracy is only going to work because we're making it work. And we're taking care of ourselves, first and foremost. Can't pour from an empty pitcher. But at the same time, getting out here and, putting in the sweat equity to do whatever you can in whatever way that you are comfortable doing it. Even if you're just phone banking, if you're knocking on doors, if you were just bringing food to the campaign's office to help feed the people who are doing this work, whatever. Anything and everything is much more helpful than nothing. And I think, kind of keeping all this stuff in mind, and keeping in mind that, again, this is, as Nipsey, coined, I guess, or made a much bigger statement, made a much bigger saying, this is a marathon, this is not a race. And so as long as we, keep that in mind, and keep fearlessness really first and foremost, then we're going to come out, we may take a step back, but we're going to continue to take 2 steps forward. So, yeah. I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but yeah. Sorry, I'm long-winded.
No, thank you. Not at all long-winded. Thank you. It was very helpful. And Patrick, you mentioned about poll watchers. I don't know if you have information about how people could explore that. If you could advise us on that, that would be great. I wanted to share.
Can I follow up with? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Can I follow up with some, with some organizations, maybe through you, and y'all can maybe reach out to folks? I don't have anything right now, but yeah. Sure. I do, but yeah.
Yeah, we can send a follow-up email, because I think you're right. Those sorts of tangible actions that we can take are really, really helpful.
Keep yourself busy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And busy on things that you feel good about.
Right. And it's productive for the movement too. Right.
Yeah. One thing I want to share, I'm going to put a link in here. Actually, I want to share 2 things that came to my mind while you guys were talking. There's a website I just put in there, choosedemocracy.us, which is a group of folks that have organized this pledge. You may have already seen it, yeah, but just in case, they have a pledge. You can take the pledge. It's basically like what you will do if there's a threat that Trump is not going to accept the results of the election. And if you go to that website and you scroll to the bottom, there's a bunch of trainings that they have, and also articles and resources on basically how what various sort of nonviolent strategists have kind of come up with in terms of how we might organize ourselves if there is a threat of a coup. And so they have already 3 trainings in the next 2 weeks or something. So you can, and then speaking of trainings, one thing I saw on the Choose Democracy website that I just want to make sure people see is this on October 3rd, this looks really helpful to me, an online training in unarmed civilian protection and accompaniment with a post-election scenario focus. I think I'm talking with a lot of people that have concerns about potential physical violence scenarios, and like wanting to like be proactive about preparing ourselves for that, but also not wanting to just be afraid. So yeah, I was really glad to see that. I'm going to sign up for that training myself. And let's see. Yeah. We ended up staying in the big group, which I think was good because we had a lot of really helpful questions. And Warren, did you have one last? Is Warren still here? Did you have one last question?
I am, and it is around the notion of strategies in terms of voting. So there has been an implicit, if not direct, kind of commitment from a Democratic perspective to push mail-in and absentee ballots, and a lot of that is focused on the health concerns that are viable. In light of the threats, implicit and explicit, of our current president to be reluctant to relinquish power or to step down or to honor the democratic process. There are some who believe that a landslide victory at the polls would be a preemptive truth to all of that. I would like kind of some commentary from all of our presenters around the viability of ramping up the notions. I'm involved in a couple of conversations here that are focused on creating a kind of atmosphere at the polls that would be drawing people to make the choice to do in-person voting if they at all possibly can. I'm wondering, just in terms of opinions and commentary on that line of thinking.
Okay, well, I'll bite. I'm not a secretary of anybody's of any states, but I do imagine that the process of getting or having the sufficient polling stations, precincts even open is going to be a challenge. The primary season, I think, showed that fairly quickly, or showed it fairly obviously. I think that there are, in addition, it can be difficult, even outside of pandemic, to get the number of poll workers that are needed to be able to staff them during for the number of voters that are expected. Let's say 1,000 people per station. I think actually it's probably more, but let's just use that as a metric. So that's I think it's as one thinks about weighs up the question of whether to cast a ballot in person or whether to use some of these options. That's something that's worth considering. The people that I think there does seem to be an increase or a surge in the number of younger folks who want to work in polling stations, and that's really exciting to see, because again, the group of the folks that are most likely to staff a polling station are likely to be those who are potentially vulnerable to COVID. So, but that being said, I think that the maybe one of the messages that has just sort of resonated with me as I would come off of this previous call is to continue to push back on this notion that how can I put it, that the results has to be kind of rushed, or that we have to have an election result, an outcome on November 3rd, on November 4th. It's just going to take that long because because of these processes. And so while I think a lot of people believe that, yeah, certainly a landslide in any case would help, there are some jurisdictions that actually can't start counting ballots before election day, even though many have started early voting. So it's a bit complicated to kind of come down on one side or the other as far as voting in person. There are a number of states, I think there's 5 or 6, that have been using mail-in ballots for years with no challenges as to the integrity of the people casting ballots. I think that it's about making sure that folks are informed about whichever decision they make, and I think maybe accepting the reality that given the 50% participation rate, it's hard to imagine a landslide victory, a margin that's so huge, that's indisputable. And so I think that for me at least, the message that I give out is that the election's not over until the ballots have been counted. So, this does go against, as I said before, the typical maybe even news organizations rush to, let's call it in Boston, but they haven't, the polls haven't closed in California. Being able to sort of say to folks that this is the important thing is that your vote is counted. However you choose to cast it, what we want to make sure is that a result isn't declared until the ballots are counted, and that is potentially going to be a longer process than people anticipate. But that doesn't, in and of itself, justify a loss of confidence in the process. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. And also it looks like Patrick has put some information on poll watching into the chat. I also put a link to the site that I know is trying to recruit poll workers. Just one more front that people can choose. So we're at 6:30. We usually do try to wrap up, pretty close to 6:30. This has been a great discussion. Thank you, everybody. And I think Warren has a closing for us. Is that right?
I do. It is an anonymous poem that I found, and it's called "Are You Ready?" Are you ready for what we're going to see? Are you ready for however it's going to be? Are you ready for how it has to go in order to prioritize a human rights flow? Are you ready to live into your reason? Are you ready to make this the season that justice stands up and justice rolls down? Are you ready to be a part of making that sound? Are you ready to save the earth from the things that desecrate her worth? Are you ready for your place in the revolution that's focused on honoring our Constitution? Are you ready for the silence to end about how the breaking transcends the bend? Are you ready to raise your voice? Are you ready to make your choice? And if so, what's it going to be? What will you set free? Are you ready? Well, ready or not, get set, because it's time to go.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you. I got to get that from you. And I'm going to compile these resources and do a follow-up call. Thank you, everybody, so much for this beautiful and uplifting sharing.
Thank you, everyone. That was wonderful. Thank you.
To all of you, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, y'all, for having me.
Yeah, what he said.
Take care, y'all. Y'all be safe.
Take care. Thanks so much, Patrick. Thanks so much, Laurie. It was really great to meet you both.
My pleasure. Likewise. It's great meeting you as well.